Hello and good evening. You're watching Eye on Africa on France 24 with me, Nadia Massi. Here are the top stories on the continent tonight. Concern in Horn of Africa nations as Russia announces a halt on the Ukraine grain deal. The agreement had helped bring down food prices, including on the continent. The EU inks a deal with Tunisia to stem irregular migration. This despite criticism of its human rights record, including treatment of sub-Saharan migrants. And environmentalists sound the alarm in Kenya as the government lifts a ban on logging, even as it promises to plant 15 billion more trees in the next decade. First, what impact will Russia's decision to suspend the Ukraine grain deal have on the continent? This Monday, the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, warned millions of people facing hunger will suffer. The deal, brokered a year ago, enabled the export of some 32 million tonnes of Ukrainian grain and helped bring down the global price of food. Now there are fears prices will rise again, potentially putting basic foodstuffs out of reach to people in poor countries. Kamina Delek has been looking at some of the concerns in Kenya, in Somalia, and in Africa's biggest economy, Nigeria.
With just a few hours to go, this vessel was the last to leave Ukraine under the Black Sea grain deal, which has not been renewed. This wheat wholesaler in Somalia is worried.
100% of all Somalis use wheat. We pray to God for peace in Ukraine and everywhere. Let all wars stop. And we hope grain routes will remain open, God willing.
Renewed 3 times, the grain deal was brokered in July 2022. It helped bring down global food prices by as much as 20% and provided aid agencies with vital supplies. After 3 years of failed rains, Somalia is especially in need, receiving 84,000 tonnes of wheat last year, up from just over a third of that in 2021. It imports nearly all of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine, putting it at particular risk.
Ultimately, participation in these agreements is a choice, but struggling people everywhere and developing countries don't have a choice. Hundreds of millions of people face hunger and consumers are confronting a global cost of living crisis, and they will pay the price.
The continent's biggest economy hasn't been spared either. On Saturday, Nigeria declared a state of emergency amid food shortages and rising prices. Even before the grain deal expired, the country's Association of Bakers last week warned bread prices are set to go up 15%. A hike that will force some families to forego bread altogether.
Well, for a bit more on the impact of the grain deal pause, earlier we spoke to Sashwat Sharaf. He's the East Africa Emergency Director for the International Rescue Committee. And he told us a bit more about food scarcity issues in Kenya, Sudan and South Sudan.
Immediate impact that we will see is scarcity of food. We will see that there will be a problem of access to food, but also in terms of immediate hike in prices, which will reduce the affordability to food for people who are already marginalized. I think we need to remember, if we just look at East Africa, there are more than 50 million people who are extremely food insecure. They are dependent on food assistance, but also because of the 2 years of drought in Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, the floods that we see today in Somalia, in South Sudan, and the conflict in Sudan itself, which has displaced more than 2 million people. There is an increasing dependence on food, given that there is less productivity within these countries because of drought, floods, and conflict. So there is an increasing dependence, and at the same time, there is an increase in prices, which will actually make things worsen for the people who are very vulnerable across East Africa, but also many other regions in the world. I just want to point to the fact that We keep talking about climate crisis, and we know that a lot of countries, including countries such as Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, are not contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, but they are the ones who face the highest amount of brunt, and that has impact on their dependence on food to the external world and their dependence on food towards Ukraine.
Next, the European Union has finalised a deal with Tunisia to help stem irregular migration. Under the agreement, the EU is to provide Tunisia with cash in exchange for stronger border controls. Amnesty International is among the organisations that has criticised the deal, saying there's mounting evidence of human rights abuses towards migrants in Tunisia. On Sunday, border guards in neighbouring Libya rescued dozens of migrants who'd been left in the desert by Tunisian authorities without food and water. Antonia Kerrigan tells us more.
Dozens of migrants from sub-Saharan Africa were rescued from 40-degree heat in the Libyan desert on Sunday, where they said they had been abandoned by Tunisian police.
The Tunisian police caught me with my wife and asked for our papers. We showed them our papers. They picked us up and put us in a truck. I asked, "Where are you taking us?" They said they wanted to expel us to Libya.
This man, now in a reception centre in Libya, described savage beatings and racial abuse at the hands of Tunisian law enforcement.
When we got to the border, they made us sit down. We were hit. They told me they wanted to kill me because I'm black. When they were finished, they left us in the desert. They shot at us. Go to Libya, we'll kill you.
After a flare-up of racial tensions early this month when a Tunisian was killed in an altercation between local and migrant communities in the port city of Sfax, more than 1,200 sub-Saharan Africans have been arrested and deported to hostile desert regions with no food or water, according to NGOs. As recently as Sunday, the EU pledged €100 million to Tunisia to reinforce its own border control and prevent migrants from crossing irregularly into Europe.
Next to Kenya on the programme, where the death toll in an investigation linked to a starvation cult has exceeded 400 lives after 12 more bodies were discovered this Monday. They were found in southeast Kenya's Shakahola forest after the cult's leader was accused of encouraging his followers to starve themselves in order to gain salvation. The self-proclaimed pastor, Paul Mackenzie, the founder of the Good News International Church, has been in police custody since April. Prosecutors say he is to face terrorism or genocide charges. Well, staying in Kenya, President William Ruto has lifted a ban on logging despite the concerns of environmentalists. Ruto said the move was long overdue and aimed at creating jobs. He said, though, his government would still be pushing ahead with its plans to plant 15 billion trees over the next decade. Climate experts warn, though, that decision on logging could be catastrophic for the country. Our team in Kenya have the report.
The forest ranger discovers damage done during the night.
There's a tree that has been destroyed.
Using GPS, the team notes the location. From 500 such reports in 2018, there are now fewer than 100. But with the end of the logging ban, all their good work could go to waste.
The kind of activity happening here is an illegal activity, happening when the ban was in place. So when it's opened, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, we are now on the spot. In fact, our guys here now must now really work across the clock because they can walk in, walk out anytime.
Commercial logging isn't their only concern. Millions of people also depend on the forests for food and wood for cooking. Forest rangers fear that everyone will come now to help themselves.
Mostly, they prefer using firewood than gas because they fear gas, Yeah. So probably like 70 to 60% they use firewood here.
The ban on logging increased forest cover. 5% of the territory was forested in 2018 versus 8% today. Kenya was aiming to reach 30% by 2030, but with the lifting of the moratorium, conservationists warn of environmental catastrophe.
Last year in 2022, 43 people were arrested because of illegal logging in the Mau forest. So you can imagine, while the ban was still in place, illegal logging was happening. Now it's open to people to come and log. Can we really see the 30% vision happening by 2030? I don't think it's possible.
Despite the doubts of NGOs, the authorities vow that the goal of planting 15 billion trees over the next 10 years will be reached.
Now, President Ali Bongo Ondimba of Gabon will seek a third term in office next month. He narrowly won re-election in 2016 with just 5,000 more votes than his rival, who claimed the results had been fixed. This time, the president is to face up to 26 challenges. Our correspondents Indira Ayuk and Marcel Amoko have more.
At the head of the Gabon Center for Elections, candidates standing in for various positions at the August 26 polls have sent in their application files. Emmanuel Mvemba is a political novice and candidate who sees himself as a defender of the interests of civil society.
The people of Gabon need a third option, the civil society. They encouraged us to contest, and we are confident they'll support us.
At a time when candidates are campaigning for a renewal of the political class, internal battles have emerged within the ruling party. Retired Police General Jean-Boniface Assalé has decided to part ways with the presidential majority. He will now run alongside the Liberal Center political party.
During these presidential elections, I will be at the center of debates. I won't be on the side of the majority or the opposition. I will be at the center, grabbing the best ideas from all sides.
Disparities also exist in the opposition camp. Despite the fact that they cannot rally behind a single candidate like it was in 2016, political analyst Assel Moreau holds that the opposition still stands a chance to win.
The winner will probably be an opposition candidate, or the most popular, just like in 2016.
The Gabon Center for Elections has until July 26 to publish the final list of those shortlisted to run for the presidential elections.
And that's a wrap for Eye on Africa this evening. Thank you for watching.
Hello, I'm Annette Young. And in this special edition, we're focusing on the upcoming Women's Football World Cup. It's been 4 years since France hosted this event, but since then it appears the women's game has not gained as much ground as it should have done. This as other nations are zooming ahead and scoring goals in more ways than one.
You can't expect to have the same salary, but you can expect to have the same stadium, the same training ground, because your body is exactly doing the same things as the men. So I think we need the same support.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young on France 24 and France24.com.